What's up? Just Aaron right here, Question Period Canada. How are you all today? Thank God it's Friday. Crazy day. It's been a crazy week. It's been a wacko week, right? We've got a very interesting show lined up. We're going to kick things off here with one of our moderators. This is Sheila Hall. You guys all know Sheila. We're going to jump right into the video and kick that off. I'd like everybody to meet Sheila Hall. She's a sweet lady in the room that says hello to everybody and keeps things straight around here. Let's take a peek. There she is. What's up, buddy?
I didn't even hear it ringing.
We're on here now, and it's working just fine.
Good.
So I'd like to introduce everybody to Sheila. This is our first moderator, our number one. She was the first person that it was suggested to me by Dive Crew Canada, actually, Sheila. Just so you know the history. There was one of the shows was so busy, I was like, maybe I need a moderator. And I was thinking about some people that I would consider for asking to do that, like to ask to do that. And then I'm kind of buddies with Dive Crew Canada, and not kind of buddies, he's my brother. And he suggested you. So
Which is amazing.
when I was thinking about you, and then somebody that cared about the channel and like keeping it the way that we do it,
Yes.
and then somebody else confirms to me like what I was thinking, I was like, yeah, we're going to do that. Then we got you in there.
Yes, and that I love it. It's wonderful. And actually, I was quite impressed with Drive Crew Canada, because I was surprised that, because I've never done anything like this before, that I would be recommended.
No, well, he did. He was like, you should get that lady Sheila to be a moderator. And I was like, yeah, I was thinking that already. So there was really no other choice. Like, and the idea here with the channel is we're learning about Canadian politics. I know that you're a little bit more right-wing than I actually am myself.
Yes, I am. But I've been in politics all my life.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty, well, I was involved in high school council and stuff like that, but at a pretty early age, I realized like the heavy politics is pretty corrupt. Not like it is these days, because like whatever's going on these days is just wacko.
I know,
but
it is.
It really is, hey.
It is. It is. It's nothing like I've seen
like ever. It didn't used to be like this, I don't think. Like
the House is very. It's becoming a joke, and it's a shame because it's our institution. And I'm glad you do this because you're getting the word out to everybody, and I think that's wonderful.
Well,
and I love
for myself. I just was curious, like what's going on. I'm a single guy. I have a house, and have noticed. And I had a government job for like almost 20 years, and I got poorer though.
Yes,
like just one guy. Like, and now I've changed my diet. Like, I don't eat the same as I used to, and who can? Like.
True. There's only me and Dave, and we feel the pinch ourselves, and we thought we were going to be pretty good in our old age, and I think we're thinking a little harder about doing things a little bit differently, so, unfortunately.
No, it's, what are you thinking about? Like, are you going to move out of Canada, go somewhere that's less expensive?
Well, you know what? I wish I could, but I can't because I have a beautiful family here, and I won't leave them. I have 8 grandchildren, 6 great-grandchildren, so it's like, no, I can't leave. I'd love to right now, like I think a lot of people would, unfortunately. But no, we've just decided that we're going to have to invest more and do whatever we can. So,
all right, cool.
That's what.
Sheila, do you mind if I run this piece to start off the Friday show?
Well, that's fine with me, but yeah, I look pretty bad.
You know, everybody says that about themselves. Like, imagine a guy like me starts a YouTube channel. It's like you're not very smart. You used to be handsome, but now you're old. And
Oh,
no. You
no, you're not
that's
old.
the people on our channel don't really care how you look as long as you're smiling at them.
Yes, well, I'll always be smiling,
Yeah,
so
no, I know that. I'm gonna
yeah.
run this piece. Just so you know,
Oh,
like I
okay.
probably should have warned you before. I record everything every time I'm online.
That's fine.
Sheila,
Yep,
you're
no,
such an
I'm fine.
important part of the channel.
Thank you, Aaron.
You're
I
like
really appreciate
you
that.
are the target audience. People like
Well,
you. We're just Canadians. Good old Canadian boys and good old Canadian girls
yeah,
across
yes,
generations that realize that we're kind of in trouble. Like, you
yeah,
wouldn't have had the same panic in 2015 when the Liberal government came in as you have now. Like,
that's
because
right.
this
That's right.
is almost like, I don't want to use the T word, like, that would be terrorism, but like, it's almost, no, this stuff, we watch it every day in the House of Parliament.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and it's getting crazier and
and
crazier.
it is
So,
getting more expensive every bill. It used to be like
oh,
a big scandal was $3 million, and now it's 60 billion. Like,
oh, it's out of hand. It's crazy. People are afraid. Thank the Lord, I don't have to be afraid. But I see people that even know going to food banks and stuff, and
oh, it's
that to me is
heartbreaking,
really sad.
that stuff. Like here in
Yeah,
Halifax, these tent cities,
yeah,
I live like I love my little house, which I just sold, but
yes, but
these tent cities are popping up everywhere.
yeah,
Like,
it's
and I
awful.
guess they're more like tent towns because there's so
Yeah,
many of them going up quickly in different areas. And in my
yeah.
area, like the Sobeys
My,
parking lot is a village. You know,
oh,
like
that's yeah. It's sad when it gets to that
it's
point.
wacko.
Um, Yeah, exactly. Wacko is
Yeah.
right. Pierre had it right in the first place, and he should never have gotten kicked out of there. But yes, I agree. Wacko. It's the whole thing. That's why it's great on your channel. You bring in the real the, let's say the news going on from the House of Commons, and the people that you have on your channel are wonderful, wonderful people. You really you caught my eye, so that's why I was here.
Well,
So I
again,
know there's a lot of people.
I think that by now there are people that pick up on my channel just because they're the same as me. They didn't know that much about politics, but now they're concerned. I'm just trying to
Yes,
learn myself and show
yeah,
people what I'm
yes,
learning about and what's going to. Because again, we mentioned there before that you've always been a bit conservative. I've
yeah,
always, I voted for the Liberals way more. Well, I've
yeah,
never
yeah,
voted conservative federally. I will next time, but
yeah,
I voted.
yeah.
I voted for the NDP before, but like
Oh,
federally and
right.
provincially, one time I voted conservative. But
Other than that,
something else is going on. Like they're not
there is.
fooling me
Yeah.
anymore. Like that's not a
No,
liberal stance. What they're taking. Like
you're right. No, it's
to
not.
not listen to 70% of your country that is
That's
paying
right.
attention that we won an election and the
That's
coalition
right.
government, something pretty suspicious about that.
That's right.
Like,
It is, and it's never happened in the past. Everything that's happening now, I've never seen in the past, and I'm very embarrassed about the House of Commons. I mean, we see what's going on all over the world talking about Canada, so it's like, wow, and what a joke it is, and
I've got
you know,
two thoughts about that. Like on one hand, it's pretty frigging entertaining to watch like the audacity of the House of Commons.
uh,
But on the
yes,
other hand,
yes,
that's sad and scary. Like
it
it
is.
shouldn't be a joke. Like
Right, that's
and
right, and
the worst part to me, Sheila, is
yeah,
my mom kind of believes like whatever CBC tells her. Like
see, this is
because
what
I grew up on a CBC that I could trust.
yeah,
22 minutes used
yes,
to be funny.
exactly. that's the thing, right? And that's what it is with the older generation. They just don't understand that it's not the same. Our politics isn't the same. Our news is not the same. You're right. You grew up on CBC as a wholesome news broadcast, but now,
A station you could trust, like,
yeah,
and
yeah,
now it's like they're
yeah,
dangling carrots and trying to fool us, and
that's right.
it's pretty funny. I
This is
showed a
right.
video on the live show yesterday that, or like today, whatever it is, and that shows how hard they are on the conservatives. Like that, it used to be journalism, like in the
Yeah,
middle, like tell the two sides and just tell their.
that's right.
But now it's all so much
It's awful.
commentary and editorial. Like
It's ridiculous. I've never seen it like this.
it's
I've
never been like
experienced
this. I
this.
don't think, Sheila. Like
No,
I'm not.
no,
I'm
it
not
hasn't.
the same age as you, but I'm old enough to know that it did not used to be like this. All right, gang. So that's our friend Sheila Hall. She's amazing. Such a big part of the channel. Sheila, appreciate all your support and help. It's been awesome. We've got more videos to show before we jump into question
Well, let's
period.
remember Trudeau's personal ideological disposition on this. He's at a fundraiser about 7 years ago, and he was asked, what's your favorite government in the world? He says the basic Chinese communist dictatorship. And then everyone thought, well, this is just, the trust fund baby showing how shallow he is. I think he believed it. I actually think he believed what he said that day. And ever since we've seen evidence that that's the case, he gave the Beijing $250,000 Canadian tax dollars for the Asian Infrastructure Bank, which has a stated purpose to recreate the ancient Silk Route and give China hegemony across Eurasia and into the Middle East. He has refused to ban Huawei on our 5G network, even as you said, as our Five Eye allies have all done that. When we told him to close the border to COVID in, I think it was January or February of 2020, he said that was racist, of course. And a month later, he closed the border, so I guess he thinks he's racist. But he took a month, and during that time, 60,000 people came from China, including 2,000 from the Wuhan province. And then after all of that, and with 2 Canadian citizens.
All right, gang, we're getting very close to the question period starting, so we've got to take a break here to say hello to everybody this morning. We've got a few new people in the room. What's up, Stanko? As always, good morning, Sheila. Good morning, Patty. Good morning, Kirk. Hey, Mike. What's up, James Vahey? Who else do we have? Leaving it to Beaver. Good to see you. Welcome to the channel. Mike Tremblay, always. Serena, what's going on, girl? How are you? Happy Friday. Maple Syrup, 123, what's going on? Good to see you. Should be a good show today. Hi, Dinah Logan, what's going on? How are you today? And Lisa Hudson, good to see you, always. I think that we've got just about everybody. I said hello to... Oh, I didn't see you, Brent. Hey, Brent, buddy, what's up, man? I didn't see you slip in the room. How are you? Happy Friday, man. Yeah, so now what we're going to do is we're going to find the question period and we're going to jump into that. Because it is time to go, guys. Here we are. We'll get through their ad.
Of our shared heritage. Solange, and congratulations.
Right, we're into the show.
Durham
Here we
Irish
go. Question period will be kicking off here in a couple of minutes. Good to see everybody today. Happy Friday. Should be a fun show.
The honourable member for Edmonton Manning.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, shady business has become this government's status quo. It has recently been revealed that the Prime Minister, only Alberta Minister, was sneakily cashing checks from a lobbyist who secured $110 million in contracts from his own government, even from his own ministry. Not only that, but until 2 weeks ago, he was listed as a director of a global health Imports, a company winning over $8 million in government contracts. The smell of a looming scandal is undeniably pungent.
What's up,
Despite
just me?
that,
Good to see you. How are you?
Time and time again, the minister has sat quietly in this house, hid behind his government house leader, claiming he did nothing wrong. But if he's so innocent, why doesn't the Minister of Employment stand up in this house today and tell us how much money he got from his lobbying side hustle?
The honourable member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
This NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost, the chaos, the drugs, and the crime. After 9 years of this Prime Minister's extremist policies, deadly hard drugs are now available in BC's public spaces, such as parks, coffee shops, and even hospitals. Now this Prime Minister
Hey,
wants to
Cheryl One,
expand
what's
his
up? How are
radical
you?
experiment from British Columbia to Toronto. Of course, my riding is only an hour away from Toronto, and my residents love going to the beautiful city of Toronto, shopping there, going to work, and cheering on their great Toronto Maple Leafs. However, if the Prime Minister expands his radical experiment, there's no doubt that it'll spread chaos, drugs like never seen before in Toronto, and that chaos and that tragedy will be spread to surrounding communities such as my own. It is time this Prime Minister ended his terrible radical experiment, which is costing lives. End it right now!
Whoa.
The honourable member for Surrey Centre.
Mr. Speaker, April is over, and with it brings the end of Sikh Heritage Month. This April, Sikh Punjabis made strides across Canada and broke records across the nation. In my home city of Surrey, Gurdwara Dashmesh Darbar hosted the largest Vaisakhi Nagar Kirtan parade with over 550,000 attendees that traveled from across the world. They sang beautiful Kirtan, served amazing langar, and shared their history and culture to all. Then, only a week later, Punjabi superstar Diljit Dosanjh made history at BC Place. Dosanjh kicked off his Canada-wide tour with a sold-out show to an audience of more than 54,000 people. Mr. Speaker, the energy was electric and the vibe was amazing. From topping billboards to selling out stadiums, feats that are usually left for the likes of Taylor Swift, they are now quickly spreading to the Punjabi community. Mr. Speaker, as Sikh Heritage Month wrapped up its 5th anniversary, and with Punjabi Sikhs breaking records every day, I've never been prouder to represent such a vibrant and flourishing community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for London Fanshawe.
Being the Member of Parliament for London Fanshawe is a privilege that I will never take lightly. Parliament is supposed to be a place where elected representatives from across the country work together to make life better for those they represent. We may disagree on exactly how that should happen, but we are supposed to discuss issues and events respectfully. We owe it to our constituents. Today was an extraordinary day. Another low in a pattern of behavior that has consistently undermined this place year after year. There are those who use every form of misinformation, intimidation, gamesmanship, meaningless slogans, and rage farming solely for the purpose of attaining and holding on to power. I know many members have questioned what we have become, and I'm not the only woman in this place who wonders if she can remain here. But I also know that my family and I have poured our lives into this institution and the ideals it espouses. I will continue to fight to stop those who undermine this important place. We have to do better. People need us to do better.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi, James Bay, Nunavik, AU. Mr. Speaker, student Annabelle St. Pierre had a heart attack in the middle of gym class in Sainte-Terre and will forever be grateful for the quick and efficient efforts of her rescuers, as well as for the first aid courses offered at her school. After a blow to the head, Annabelle passed out and fell to the ground. The silver lining? Her gym teacher was David Leblond. David had been training his grade 9 students in CPR techniques for almost 20 years. Helped by staff members Cheryl Chalifou and Joanie Filion, he used the defibrillator twice and was lucky enough to save Annabelle. Annabelle has no recollection of the operation that saved her life, but since that day, a precious bond has been forged between her and her rescuers. So I'd like to pay tribute to and congratulate David, Cheryl, and Joanie for their heroic intervention, and wish Annabelle every success as she continues her studies at Cégep Val d'Or. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Portage-Lisgar.
Mr. Speaker, here is a memo to corporate Canada from the next Prime Minister of Canada. Fire your lobbyists, ignore the politicians, and go straight to the people. There are far too many corporations that have Stockholm Syndrome in this country. They feel grateful when their taxes only go up a little bit, or when the job-killing regulation isn't as destructive as it could have been. To be clear, advancing your interests isn't done by meeting politicians or holding luncheons or forums. If you have a good policy proposal, you need to convince Canadians that it's good for them. You must convince waitresses, carpenters, truckers, seniors, and families. Because when we start hearing it at the doorstep, that's when we'll know that it's a good idea. Because that's who Conservatives will be listening to, the common sense of the common people. The latest Liberal tax hike or get bureaucracy out of the way
What's
to
up,
build
Silver
homes,
Fox? Good to see you.
mines, factories, pipelines, or anything else. You should cancel your fancy lunch, fire your lobbyist, and go straight to the people. Right. Unlike Liberals who only listen to insiders, Conservatives will always listen to the common sense of the common people.
That's right here. Well
fire the lobbyist.
The honourable member for Niagara Centre.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this weekend I will be attending the Sports Wall of Fame Class of 2024 induction ceremony in the city of Welland. I wish to congratulate and recognize Dan Girardi, Jack J.B. Ballantyne, and Steve Latinovich for their contributions to hockey, Corey Lee for his contributions to judo, Lauren Aiello for her contributions to rowing, Mike Rayo for his contributions to basketball, and Ray Sarkis for his contributions in sport at Niagara College. I also wish to congratulate the 3 teams being inducted for winning Ontario championships. The 1973 Welland Atlas Steel Tykes baseball team, the 1977 Club Richelieu midget baseball team, and the 2016 Jean Vanier Lynx Senior Girls High School basketball team. Mr. Speaker, sports are more than just games. They're powerful agents of positive change within our communities. All of these individuals have inspired future athletes in our community at large. I look forward to recognizing the successes this weekend, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
What's up, True Blue? Good to see you,
Just
man.
a quick reminder before we go to oral questions that, of course, statements by members, of course, is to 60 seconds. We had a few offenders, but we, of course, try to get them in to make sure that we have these great statements for our riders.
Tanchema is better than Fergus, I know that.
Oral questions, question.
Here we go. Who's going to be up first? Lansman, do you think? Oh, we're opening with Luke
After
Berthold.
9 years of extreme ideological policies,
like
this
Berthold,
Prime Minister
but-
is not worth the cost in lives lost by drug overdose.
Translators, I'm not
Today
a big fan
marks
of.
exactly 1 week, 7 days since the Premier of British Columbia asked him to back down from his disastrous experiment with legalizing hard drugs. When will the Prime Minister, the Liberal Prime Minister, put an end to his extreme policy that has caused chaos and death? Give us a date. A date, please. The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mother, and as a member of this government, the tragedies that are happening across this country and the lives lost are completely devastating. It's shameful that the opposition continues to politicize this. In BC asked the federal government to work with them on a 3-year pilot program. They have come to us and asked for an amendment to that proposal. We are working through it with them because, Mr. Speaker, we have to get this right. We are here to save lives. We need to get it right with law enforcement. We need to get it right with our public health services because our focus here is to save lives so that people don't die alone. They have no plan and...
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. This Prime Minister should be ashamed to have waited 7 days and to still not have announced putting an end to this program that is costing lives every day. 6 lives are lost every day in British Columbia from drug overdose, and the Liberals are just waiting around. There are dirty syringes on soccer fields. Nurses have to stop breastfeeding their children because they fear for the health of their children from the fumes of drugs used in hospital, Mr. Speaker. Crime is on the rise. People are afraid, and Quebecers are affected by this crisis too. When will the Prime Minister stop dilly-dallying and finally put an end to his radical experiment? We want a date, please. The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
McKinnon is the worst.
British Columbia has suggested some adjustments to their pilot project. We support them. Our approach is, and always has been, saving lives and reducing danger in communities. That is what we have committed to do, and that's what we are doing. We will not be taking any lessons, Mr. Speaker, from the Conservative Party. Their immoral policies failed. In fact, even an advisor to Stephen Harper called those policies very, very old and immoral. So we will not take lessons from them, and we will fix this on our own. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Well, you know, the Prime Minister's hesitation is very worrying. He only has to say the word to put an end to this deadly experiment because he's the one responsible for Canada's criminal laws. End it now. It's as easy and simple as that. It's disturbing to see him stubbornly maintaining this extreme policy and with the support of the Bloc Québécois. This morning in the Journal de Montréal, we read that there's crack, heroin, and excrement in Montreal's Chinatown and in Montreal. In fact, the daycare in Chinatown and Montreal is at the center of growing violence, but just yesterday, the Bloc Québécois health critic reiterated his support for decriminalization. Will the Prime Minister finally say no today to legalizing hard drugs in Montreal and across the country? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the member across the way knows full well that there have not been any official requests made by authorities in Montreal, in Quebec, or elsewhere. So this pilot project will not be extended to Quebec or to Montreal. He knows that full well, and I urge him to be factual. But, Mr. Speaker, we will not be taking any lessons from this Conservative Party, whose main advisor said that what the Conservatives did while they formed government was immoral. The Honourable Member for Stormont on the South Glengarry.
Since the BC NDP government begged this Prime Minister to reverse his decision that made it legal to shoot up heroin on public transit and to smoke meth and blow it into the faces of nurses in hospitals, on what date will the Liberals make that illegal again in British Columbia?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, the province of BC came to the federal government with a 3-year pilot program using decriminalization so that people would not die alone, that they would get health care, Mr. Speaker. The BC government has asked for an amendment to their proposal. We are working through it with them, Mr. Speaker, because we need to get it right. We want people to live, Mr. Speaker, not be criminalized. We want them to get health care. The opposition doesn't have a plan, and all they do is stand there and shamefully fundraise off the lives of people who are dying.
They keep saying they don't have a plan. Tax the tax,
It has been a
balance
week.
the budget,
Why is this not
reduce
done
the crime.
already?
Sounds like
the
a plan.
stories in BC are horrifying. Heroin shot up in parks, on buses, and even at Tim Hortons in Maple Ridge. Nurses having meth smoke blown in their face. Parents in Abbotsford scouring sports fields before their kids' games to make sure there's no needles and syringes around. But it gets worse. The Prime Minister won't even rule out expanding this to cities like Montreal and Toronto that have asked for the same craziness. Why won't they clearly give a date and frankly just end this failed policy now in BC and never expand this anywhere else in Canada?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, ever since the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was born 42 years ago, Canadians have had confidence that their federal government will respect their charter-guaranteed rights and freedoms. Now, the Conservative Party will not say they have promised to tear up the Charter of Rights in matters of criminal justice. Now, where will they stop? They have not ruled out extending it to reproductive rights. They have not ruled out extending it to the rights of people for a fair trial. Where will these Conservatives stop when it comes to ripping up the rights of Canadians, Mr. Speaker?
L'honorable député de Manicouagan.
The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that there's a reason behind the plan to bring the CBC and Radio-Canada closer together. The goal is to protect the CBC from a future Conservative government that plans to make cuts to English-language public television. It has nothing to do with modernization. It has nothing to do with digital. It has nothing to do with efficiency. It's just management's means of defending itself against a possible future Conservative government. They are prepared to sacrifice Radio-Canada's identity to save the English-language CBC. Can the Minister assure us that she has absolutely no intention of transforming Radio Canada into a French language version of the CBC.
The Ministre du Patrimoine Canadien.
The Honourable Canadian Heritage Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc Québécois is speculating, and I would encourage them to be cautious with their speculation about what's occurring with Radio-Canada. I would like to reassure them they love Radio-Canada, as we do, and I would like to reassure them that French language content and programming for Radio-Canada will remain distinct. Francophones throughout Canada watch Radio-Canada. Radio-Canada will use taxpayer money wisely. We know what the Conservatives want to do, though. They want to basically defund the public broadcaster, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Manicouagan. Mr. Speaker, the Heritage Minister is working on a plan on her end. CBC's management team is working on a plan on its end. The two aren't talking to each other, and they have no idea what each other's plans are. This is yet another example of the federal government's legendary efficiency. And these are the people we're supposed to be counting on to ensure Radio-Canada's independence from CBC. These are the people we are supposed to be counting on to ensure the future of broadcasting our culture. Will the minister heed the Bloc's proposal and make the CBC and Radio-Canada two separate independent Crown corporations? The Honourable Canadian Heritage Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Bloc does not seem to understand that Crown corporations are managed internally at arm's length from government, and that is very important for freedom of the press, for our public broadcaster. Now, I commit to assessing the financial structure and governance of CBC and Radio-Canada to ensure that it is exactly what is needed in our times in 2024. The Bloc Québécois was not able to protect the public broadcaster from cuts when the Conservatives were in power, and they will not be able to protect Radio-Canada from a future Conservative government, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie. Mr. Speaker, for 6 months now, Palestinians in Gaza have been subjected to bombing every single day. Over 34,000 people have been killed, including more than 14,000 children. A humanitarian crisis is unfolding before our very eyes. 1.5 million people have been displaced without medication, without fuel or food. The Liberals promised to issue 1,000 visas, but only 100 or so have actually been issued. 4 months after calling Immigration Canada, Ahmad had no answer. So he made his way here on his own. Today he has a question for the Immigration Minister. Will the minister save the lives of his nephews and nieces who are trapped in hell?
The Honourable Minister.
The Honourable Minister of Immigration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We are working around the clock to get people out of Gaza. We have issued more than 100 visas, though. People are currently traveling from there to Canada. We are defending this operation, bringing people here, but Canada does not control exits from Rafah. But when people are able to exit, which we don't control, then they have biometric testing, and then we're able to bring them here. Thank you.
Moldy homes, no clean water, impassable roads, no internet. This is the reality of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples in Canada under the Liberals and the Conservatives.
That's right.
Indigenous communities have identified over $400 billion in infrastructure needs because of historic underfunding. Yet the Liberals barely scratch the surface of this gap with the federal budget. What is the Liberals' plan to correct their discriminatory funding choices?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Speaker. I want to thank the member opposite for an important question. There's nothing more important to our government than reconciliation with the Indigenous peoples. And that's why from the very beginning, we've been working very closely in partnership with all Indigenous peoples across the country in ensuring that we rectify for the past injustices to make the necessary investments. It is difficult work. It's work that we'll continue to do with Indigenous peoples, and that's why in this budget and budget past, we have made tremendous amount of investments in Indigenous communities across the country, and will continue to do that work. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Liberals continue to insist they don't have enough data from the BC government to end the open drug use of hard drugs like cocaine or fentanyl on streets, in playgrounds and in hospitals in British Columbia. The BC government confirmed that they sent the Liberals the data that they requested within hours of asking. But if the minister can't make a decision, how about the fact that more British Columbians sadly died of overdoses in January and February of 2024 than in all of 2014? Wow. Why are these Liberals not being honest with Canadians and just end their radical drug policy?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, every step of the way we have been working hand in hand with provincial jurisdictions, communities and municipalities across this country, speaking to families, speaking to health teams to understand how we save lives, Mr. Speaker. We are working with the province of BC on the amendment to their proposal. We need to get it right, Mr. Speaker. We need to make sure that communities are safe, but we also need to make sure that people aren't dying alone, that they are getting the healthcare services that they need. You can't treat someone if they're dead, Mr. Speaker. We are committed to saving lives.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if that member thinks that BC's experience with open public drug use is so great, then why isn't she advocating for it in her province? I was talking to a resident just 2 days ago from my constituency.
Hold on a sec. We are getting a lot of yelling back and forth, and I would appreciate it if people could just keep it down. I know. I'm hearing a lot. I'm hearing a lot. I'm hearing a lot. I'm hearing a lot from all ends of the chamber. So I just want to make sure that we keep the down as we debate these important issues. The Honourable Member of Kelowna Lake Country.
What do you think about Donchma, Patty?
Well, Mr. Speaker, if that member thinks that the BC experience with open public drug policies and drug use is so great, then why isn't she advocating for it in her own province? I was talking to a resident from my community just a couple nights ago who told me she came around the corner from her apartment to be faced with something that burnt her eyes. And people were openly using drugs on the street. She is rightfully concerned about what she is exposed to, and unfortunately this is not an isolated incident. After 9 years of this Prime Minister, enough is enough. Why are these Liberals not being honest with Canadians and just end their drug policies?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Of course, Mr. Speaker, that question has been asked many times and answered many times by my honourable colleague, the Minister. What I want to know, this member is a female member of her caucus. This morning, the headline reads, "Conservatives don't rule out using notwithstanding clause beyond criminal justice matters."
Shameful.
50 years ago, Roe v. Wade was enacted in the U.S., and women have lived under that protection in the U.S. for 50 years. For 42 years.
Order.
What are we talking about the U.S. for?
Goes all ways. To be able to keep it down so I can actually hear the answers, the questions, and of course the answers. The Honourable Government House Leader.
From the top.
15 seconds.
From the bottom, somebody
For 50
said.
years, women in the U.S. have lived under the protection of Roe v. Wade. For 42 years in Canada, women in Canada have lived under the protection of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now Conservatives will not rule out using the notwithstanding clause beyond criminal justice matters. Will that member stand in her place and tell us what rights from women does she intend to take away?
Hear, hear.
I think I hear Michael Cooper. Yeah, I can see him. He's in the corner of the screen.
Okay, that'll get you back up to 20% Steve. Let's say 50 seats in the next election.
Ready for the next question? All right. The Honourable Member for Langley Aldergrove.
After 9 years of this Liberal NDP Prime Minister, it is clear that he is not worth the crime, the chaos, the drugs, and the disorder. As a direct result of his extremist drug policies, we have open drug use in front of an elementary school in Langley, discarded needles at a playground in Willoughby, and crack smoking at a bus stop in Brookswood. People from Langley want to know, when is this Prime Minister going to end his extremist experiment to legalize hard drugs like cocaine, fentanyl, and opioids?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, I will say this again. We have to approach the opioid crisis and the illegal toxic drug supply with compassion, science, evidence, and healthcare, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we all want the same thing: public safety and access to public healthcare services so that people don't die alone. We are approaching the issue of public consumption with urgency, Mr. Speaker, working with the BC government on their requested amendments to their proposal. BC asked for this exemption. We will continue to work with them hand in hand because families are demanding it of us. They don't want to lose their loved ones, and on this side of the House, we will save lives.
The honourable member for Langley-Aldergrove.
Well, the results are in, and they're a disaster. 2,500 opioid overdoses last year in British Columbia.
Order. If we need to shut things down over here, I need to shut things down over there. So try to keep the chatter down. The honourable member for Langley-Aldergrove.
The results are in. And they're a disaster. 2,500 deaths last year and 6 on average every day this year. Now, the Liberal minister responsible for hard drug use says, well, she's waiting for more information from BC, but the BC government says they've given her all the information, as if 2,500 drug deaths in 1 year isn't enough data to go on. So Canadians want to know, why are Liberals misleading them? And when are they going to put an end to this disastrous, failed drug use experiment?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
That question has been asked and answered. BC has been making adjustments to their pilot project, and of course, Mr. Speaker, we are supporting them. But I had no luck with the last member. Let me ask this member. Conservatives will not rule out using the notwithstanding clause.
Order. As I have said before,
cow guts.
If I need to shut the noise down in one corner of the room, I need to shut it down in the other corner of the room. So please let the honourable member respond so we can get on to the next question. The honourable Government House Leader from the top.
To the Liberals that time.
Mr. Speaker, of course, BC is making adjustments to their pilot project, and we are supporting them in that endeavour, and the member should be under no ambiguity about that. The member is ambiguous, however, like his previous colleague, about which charter protections that party would rip up. Is it reproductive rights? Is it the right to a fair trial? Is it the right to free expression, Mr. Speaker? That member needs to get up, that party needs to get up, that leader needs to get up and tell Canadians exactly which fundamental charter rights they will be taking away from Canadians.
I'm trying to shut down that end. I'm trying to shut down this end. I want to be able to hear the answers to the questions and the answer, and that's enough of that. The honourable member for North Okanagan-Shuswap.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, this Prime Minister is clearly not worth the cost. His minister responsible for hard drugs on the streets is misleading Canadians. She said the Liberal government is waiting for more information from BC on if they should reverse their decision that allows cocaine, opioids and fentanyl in parks, playgrounds and hospitals. The BC NDP government confirmed they answered within hours to the government's request for more information. Why is this Liberal NDP government misleading Canadians, and why can't they just end their disastrous drug policy?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that member needs to unplug from the wall, replug and reboot. He's not listening to the earlier questions. We've told them very clearly. BC has requested changes, and we are working with BC to make those changes. But maybe that member will tell us specifically which freedoms, which rights described in the 42-year-old Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms that Canadians cherish will he be advocating removing from Canadian women, from Canadian people? Is it the freedom of expression? Is it reproductive rights?
The honourable member for North Okanagan-Shuswap.
I'd like to remind the member that his government illegally invoked the Emergencies Act, removing civil liberties from Canadians.
Good point, Mel Arnold. Good point.
Guilty of it. Broke the law. After 9 years of radical NDP Liberal government drug policies and toxic drug deaths in BC reaching a 380% increase, the number of children aged 10 to 18 who have died from overdoses has increased by more than 5 times. Opioids and illicit drugs are now the leading cause of death of youth aged 10 to 18 in BC. Will the Prime Minister end his radical drug policies, or will he continue to show he's simply not worth the cost?
The Honourable Minister of Labour.
Speaker, there are right ways to go about things, and then there are explosive and dramatic and catastrophic ways to go about things. To talk about using the notwithstanding clause, and I quote,
I'm going to make sure the Honourable Minister has his time. The Honourable Minister of Labour.
The Leader of the Opposition's response that all of my proposals are constitutional and we will make them constitutional using whatever tools the Constitution allows me to use to make them constitutional. I think you know exactly what I mean, he says. They will happen and they will stay in place for anybody like me who has a right that was afforded to him because of this charter in my lifetime. These are chilling words that they need.
L'honorable député de Repentigny.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Canada's greenhouse gas emissions increased in 2021-2022. That is why the advisory group appointed by the Environment Minister himself.
We've got a few new people in the group, in the chat, that I'd like to say welcome to. It's hard to keep track. Brian McDonald, how are you this morning? Slackjaw Not Saying, what's up? Good to see you. Tommy Gunn, good morning. Greta, the other one, what is up? Kim Burley, what's up? Dive Crew Canada, always, what's up, man? Thaco XP, what's up? How are you? M. Hobbs, good day. Hey, Cheryl 01. Dylan Gellert, how are you?
When O.J. Simpson was on trial a long time ago. It's been a long time since our emissions were this low. So our plan is working, and we need to continue to fight climate change. The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Yesterday, the minister boasted that Canada was, I quote, the only major oil producer in the world to have proposed putting a cap on oil emissions. The operative word being propose, not impose. I would remind the minister that once he had greater ambitions than proposing to be more progressive than Russia and Saudi Arabia. And while the minister is proposing to do better than those countries, well, he's also opening up a shiny new Trans Mountain pipeline. When are we going to see some action? Not action to increase emissions, but action to reduce them. The Honourable Environment Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If my colleague had read yesterday's report, she would see that our track record is similar to that of Germany, that of Italy, and better than Italy and the United States. We're not like Russia and Iran here. Our climate performance is better than the United States's. We have already tabled our consultation document to cap oil and gas emissions. We will have draft regulation this year and final regulations by next year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Parkland.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister isn't worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder that he's unleashed on our streets. And after 9 years, this Prime Minister's radical experiments with legalized hard drugs is turning our hospitals, beaches, and schoolyards into one giant drug injection site. Our children are witnessing drug abuse, discarded needles, and overdoses as they play and learn. And the Prime Minister's taxpayer-funded drugs are now ending up in the hands of our children. When will this Prime Minister stop treating our communities like his own personal woke petri dish and end his radical experiments on Canadians? Hear, hear.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Once again, that question has been asked many times and answered. I wonder about their hearing over there.
But never answered.
Let me read.
See, that's the thing.
We get mail, Mr. Speaker. Let me read a quote. Canada's significant credit strengths will continue to preserve its AAA-rated sovereign credit profile, underpinned by its high economic strength and very strong institutions and governance. Together, these factors provide Canada with a strong foundation for future growth and very high degree of economic resiliency to potential shocks. Mr. Speaker, thank you to Moody's credit ratings.
Here, here. The honourable member for York Simcoe.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, Canadians are struggling. In rampant crime, drugs and disorder have become the norm. Instead of offering treatment and support to those who need it, this Prime Minister is jeopardizing the safety of Canadians by allowing hard drugs to be used openly in public, on buses, in hospitals, and right in front of children and their families. Enough! Will these Liberals end their radical drug policies, or will they inflict the same chaos seen in BC elsewhere?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
That question has been asked and answered, but the letter goes on, Mr. Speaker. It says, in addition, Canada's credit profile has very limited susceptibility to event risks, supported by stable political institutions, a strong and well-regulated banking system, and reserve currency status, which underscores the government's deep and unfettered market access. At the same time, despite an initial sharp deterioration in the government's fiscal position from the pandemic, Canada's debt ratios have since materially improved, and the government is pursuing a gradual path of fiscal consolidation. Thank you, Moody's credit rating.
The honourable member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
We all know, Canadians have never had it so good. We hear it over and over again. During Wednesday's question period, the Prime Minister guaranteed to the Canadian public, those who are counting on interest rates going down, that they will start coming down in the next 2 months. That's great news. The problem, the Bank of Canada, the organization that actually decides interest rates, says they haven't decided that yet. So, Mr. Speaker, simple question for the government. Who's lying, the Governor of the Bank of Canada or the Prime Minister?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Based on what the Conservatives are saying, then they are going to need to explain to Canadians how Canada is rated #1 for budget balance by the International Monetary Fund, maintains a AAA credit rating reaffirmed by Moody's just yesterday, has the best net debt to GDP ratio and the lowest deficit in the G7, has been projected by the IMF and the OECD to have the strongest economic growth in the G7, and is #1 in the world when you adjust per capita in foreign direct investment. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we continue to lead. On that side of the House, they continue to mislead.
The honourable member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
Mr. Speaker, over the last 6 quarters, we've had declining GDP per capita growth. We've had 0 GDP per capita growth in the last 10 years. And this government's response, more spending money, more spreading fire on the already burning out of control inflationary fire. $61 billion in new spending. But once again, I ask, Canadians are barely hanging on. Some of them are going to lose their houses short. Will they stand behind the Prime Minister's word and guarantee that interest rates will go down? Or is it more misinformation from this government?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians shouldn't listen to the trumped-up rhetoric of the Conservatives when it comes to our economy. Just yesterday, the independent Governor of the Bank of Canada reaffirmed that due to our commitment to the key fiscal guardrails we have put in place, that he believes, and I quote, "Since the government's net fiscal plan hasn't changed a lot, I don't think it's going to have a big effect on our projections for the economy or inflation." And with inflation in the target range for 3 months in a row, Canadians have reason for hope. Conservatives are looking to cut our investments in the middle class, and we're not going to let them.
The honourable member for Edmonton Griesbach.
Edmontonians are fed up with Loblaw's sky-high prices and record profits at their expense. Every time they go to the grocery store, they have to put food back on the shelves. The Liberals are doing nothing about it, and the Conservatives are in the pocket of Galen Weston. People are frustrated, using their power to boycott Loblaws. Edmontonians deserve a government that fights for them, not wealthy CEOs. When will the Liberals open their ears, start listening to Canadians, and stop the greed?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Deputy Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know that the member opposite feels that grocery prices are too high, and they have been certainly. But good news is that the CPI index has showed that food prices are stabilizing in our economy, which is good news for Canadians. What our government is doing is proposing multiple rounds of reforms to our Competition Act, and it's good to see the NDP and other parties starting to work with us. Just this week, earlier this week, we got C-59 through the Finance Committee, which was great progress on reforming our competition laws. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
Sadly, Alberta is on track to have the most toxic drug deaths per capita in Canada by June. Clearly, Alberta's Conservatives' recovery-only model is tragically failing. But you know who's jumped on board to support it? The Conservative leader. And while he regularly meets up with far-right extremist groups, he won't even meet with Moms Stop the Harm, families who've lost loved ones to the toxic drug crisis. That's the kind of guy he is. But the Liberals have let this happen by not taking a national approach to fighting this crisis. When will this Liberal government finally intervene?
What's up, Steve Jones? Yentes, what's up? How are you guys?
Anybody want to pick that one up?
Nobody wants to answer the question.
Sorry,
Big surprise.
My one eye's not working. The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Lord.
And I want to thank
bad.
the member for his question, because too many Canadians are dying every day from this ever-challenging illegal toxic drug supply. But the opposition leader talks a big talk about investing in treatment. But when they were last in government, they cut 2/3 of their own drug treatment fund. Will he slam the door in the face of those groups like Moms Stop the Harm who are asking for help? Will he cancel safe consumption sites knowing that this saves lives? Will he refuse to meet the moment of this situation and just use slogans and do nothing? Or will he commit to harm reduction, prevention, treatment, and saving lives?
L'honorable député de Pontiac.
The honourable member for Pontiac. Mr. Speaker, the other day, I was asking myself why it's so important for Canada to reduce its emissions. And it's important for our economy. We can't thrive economically.
What's up, Dave? Good to see you, man.
Environment. Looking at the National Inventory Report, I was
Kim Burley as well. Good to see you. Welcome to the channel.
Emissions. So I'd like to ask the Minister of the Environment what next steps are to ensure that we remain on the right path. The Honourable Minister of the Environment.
A clown. Look at that
Mr.
jacket.
Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. Yes, yesterday's report, as confirmed by the Canadian Climate Institute, the report shows that we are reaching our 2026 interim goal and our 2030 goals. We're on the right path. We have reduced our GHG emissions to an extent that is the equivalent of removing 15 million vehicles from our roads. But we do need to do more, and that is why we're aiming to have a carbon-neutral transportation network by 2035 and a GHG cap, which will be coming out soon.
Thousand Islands, Rita Lakes.
$110 million. That's how much this Liberal employment minister's private company landed from this Liberal government. The Liberal minister used his role to get meetings for his business partner with the finance minister and with the prime minister's office, using his position to enrich his business partner and himself. After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, it's clear they're not worth the cost and certainly not the corruption. So how much taxpayer cash did this Liberal minister pocket on the backs of hardworking Canadians?
Corruption. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, Canada, of course, has the most stringent ethics rules for elected parliamentarians in almost all of the world. The minister has addressed this question, and it's pretty clear the Conservatives will do anything they can to distract from their vow to rip up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
That's right. The Honourable Member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rita Lakes.
Of course, Speaker, these Liberals are trying to distract and divide. A common-sense Conservative government would, of course, only use the notwithstanding clause on matters of criminal justice. It's unconscionable that this government would allow a mass murderer like the Quebec mosque shooter to ever be released from prison. He murdered 6 innocent worshippers, and the only way he should have left maximum security was in a box.
That's right.
Our question was about the corruption of their government, the employment minister pocketing cash on the backs of taxpayers. Will they do the right thing and call in the RCMP?
That's right. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, it's very nice, Mr. Speaker, to have some clarity on that. I remind that member that at one time in this country, reproductive rights were a criminal matter. So could he lay out in very specific detail for this House, now that he's talking about the notwithstanding clause, very specifically, would he make reproductive rights for women in this country into a criminal matter? Once again, yes or no?
McKinnon's problem, guys. Use toilet paper that time.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Speaker, a lobbying firm owned by the business partner of the lone Alberta minister secured $110 million in federal contracts. As money went out the door, the minister was receiving payments from the very same lobbying firm. This is scandalous. Canadians deserve to know, what was the minister's cut? How much was he paid?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Canada has incredibly stringent ethics rules, Mr. Speaker, and the minister has addressed those questions. But this member has, I don't know if he's communicated with his honourable friend that just got up, but maybe he could answer for us specifically now. Which criminal matters will apply to the ripping up of Canada's fundamental rights and freedoms? I would ask him to be very specific, point us to chapter and verse. Which rights of Canadians is he vowing to rip up today?
Hear, hear. The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the minister is clearly in full cover-up mode because it gets worse. The minister's business partner was lobbying the minister's own department as checks were being cut from the lobbying firm to the minister. If that doesn't smell of self-dealing and corruption, I don't know what does. So again, how much did the minister pocket from this lobbying firm since he was appointed at CAP?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, of course, Mr. Speaker, the minister has addressed that question, but I want to return to this theme. The Conservatives.
D'Entremont's so much better than Fergus, guys. Like, again, it's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than
we have a number of questions to go, so I do want to make sure that we have order in the House. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it's pretty clear those folks over here have not really spoken and gotten their story straight. We have this member proposing to put reproductive rights back into a category of criminal behavior. We have other members who will not answer which specific rights they will take away. This member has refused to stand up and answer the question of which, is it the freedom of expression? What specific rights would your leader take away as a result of his vow to tear up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms?
Make sure the questions and answers to the chair.
The honourable member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, SMEs are increasingly telling us that the federal government is acting predatory about CEBA. They're telling us that they've paid back the entirety of their Canada Emergency Business Account loan, but because of delays of sometimes only a few days that they're not even responsible for, the federal government is still cutting their $20,000 grant. These Liberals are showing a great deal of intransigence, and they're threatening these businesses with bankruptcy. Why? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
And I want to thank that member for continued advocacy for small businesses in Canada. We share that view, and that is why that the CEBA program supported over 900,000 small businesses through the pandemic, and we estimate 80% of them have repaid their loans so far. As we move away from the pandemic, we are taking serious concrete action to support small businesses, both by providing funding and cutting costs, Mr. Speaker. And I'm getting heckled, of course, by the Conservatives who voted against every single measure that we have put forward since 2015 to support small businesses. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Terrebonne. Mr. Speaker, the government is supposed to support struggling businesses and not hit them when they're down. This is a perfect yet upsetting illustration of how the federal government mismanages programs. You can't get a human being on the line when you call the federal government. This rigid way of managing things shows no humanity. Can the government tell us how many businesses have paid back the money but will still miss out on $20,000 due to the federal government's lack of humanity?
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. I answered that question, the previous answer, with 80%, nearly 80% of small businesses have actually already paid back their CEBA loans. As we move forward from the pandemic, small businesses have nearly 3 years until the end of 2026, Mr. Speaker, to repay their CEBA loans, and they have access to low 5% interest rate. Meanwhile, we are investing in communities, strengthening our economy. Budget 2024 has a number of supports for small businesses, whether it's through supporting startups with AI, quantum. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to more to come to speak to and more.
The honourable member for Coast Bay Central Notre Dame.
Mr. Speaker, last week, Winston at the Gander Area Food Bank confirmed that usage is up 44% in just 6 months. He's concerned about volunteer burnout, Mr. Speaker. The CEO of Food Banks Canada now says that due to record-smashing demand, food banks are on the brink. For folks forced to now use food banks, Mr. Speaker, who never had to do it before, this government and this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost. So will he stop his increase in carbon tax by 23%, or better still, axe the tax so that Canadians can afford to put food on the table?
Axe the tax. The Honourable Minister of Labour.
$1,192 for a family of 4 in Newfoundland and Labrador, Mr. Speaker. $760 for a family of 4 in New Brunswick. $824 in Nova Scotia. $880 in PEI. $1,120 in Ontario. $1,200 in Manitoba. $1,800 in Alberta. These aren't phony benefits. These aren't chicken feed, as it's been described by the other side. This is cold, hard cash. This goes into the pockets of Canadians. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Yorkton Melville.
Canadians cannot wait for a Conservative government to restore all of the rights and freedoms that this government has destroyed. After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister has driven 2 million people to food banks. With record-smashing demand and donations drying up, the CEO of Food Banks Canada says food banks are becoming unsustainable. Knowing Canadians are suffering, this Prime Minister raised the carbon tax by 23% and refused to pass 234 in its original form to make food less expensive for Canadians. He's not worth the cost. Why is this Prime Minister punishing the poor and exterminating the middle class?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Wow, Mr. Speaker, that member who has advocated to roll back the rights of women just stood in this place and said that Conservatives can't wait to implement those measures. Mr. Speaker, women will remember what Conservatives are saying. They are saying they will take away women's rights just like in the U.S., and we will not stand for it.
O'Connell is a twit. He thinks that O'Connell's a twit.
The honourable member for Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, did you ever wonder why former inmates who have had vocational training while incarcerated are just as likely to reoffend as those who have not, despite the fact that Corrections Canada claims to have issued 112,000 vocational certificates in the past 3 years alone? Well, the answer is this. These vocational certificates are meaningless participation awards. In the same period, only 64 inmates in the entire country were able to complete a Red Seal apprenticeship program. Why has Corrections Canada failed to introduce real vocational certification programs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the Harper Conservatives did everything in their power to restrict corrections from being able to offer offenders vocational opportunities to ensure that there isn't recidivism. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' own former criminal justice expert has come out condemning Conservative policy, saying it was not based in facts. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives, when it comes to criminal justice, do nothing to keep our communities safe, but we have.
The honourable member for Yukon.
Mr. Speaker, the overdose crisis continues to devastate our country, and no region, including the North, has been spared. As a former Chief Medical Officer, I'm also deeply concerned by the level of disinformation currently being promulgated by the Conservatives. The study that I proposed is currently in Health Committee, allowing all parties to travel around the country, learn from experts, and make thoughtful recommendations to the government. Can the Minister of Mental Health and Addictions tell us if she agrees that to address this crisis we need to work together using the full spectrum of tools that we have?
The Honourable Minister of Mental Health and Addictions.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member. Just like the member from the Yukon said, we need to trust in science and in healthcare, not slogans written on the back of a napkin. Canada's model recognizes that prevention and treatment are two ends of the spectrum of care, but we also must care for people. People who are struggling in between the spaces while they struggle with substance use. People need to be alive to make it to recovery. Canada's model means supporting cities. It means supporting Indigenous peoples with the Emergency Treatment Fund. It means preventative measures like implementation of the Icelandic model. It means providing law enforcement with the tools they need. It means saving lives.
L'honorable député de Portneuf, Jacques Cartier.
Miss. The Honourable Member for Portneuf, Jacques Cartier. Mr. Speaker, to listen to this government, you'd think that everything's going great, but actually, people are smothered by the cost of living. They can barely pay the bills after 9 years of this Liberal government. Currently, servicing the debt costs more than $54 billion. That's more than the health transfers to our provinces and territories. And the Bloc Québécois voted for this. The Bloc members say one thing and do the exact opposite. When will this Prime Minister stop wasting money so that Quebecers can...
Hey, Jack, what's up? Good to see you, Mr. Wilson.
I will tell my honourable colleague what Quebecers have regained: dental care, school lunch programs, nearly 35,000 new childcare spots funded by the Canadian government. They have regained a housing program and billions of dollars that have been agreed on with the Legault government in order to build new housing faster. So what Quebecers have regained here is progress, well-being, and real forward movement. The Honourable Member, as I was saying, this government thinks everything is doing great. I would like to invite them to visit some grocery stores. We see grocery stores putting anti-theft chips on T-bone steaks. That's how bad it is. After 9 years of this Liberal government, our debt has doubled, and yet our friends in the Bloc Québécois have voted for $500 billion in additional spending. Yesterday, Tiff Macklem, the Governor of the Bank of Canada, confirmed that this government's expenses is keeping interest rates high. When will this Prime Minister, supported by the Bloc Québécois, stop wasting money on the backs of Quebecers? The Honourable Government House Leader. Well, my colleague maybe didn't see the same thing as I did, but yesterday, the Governor of the Bank of Canada, the same person, by the way, that the Conservatives promised to fire, said that he is considering returning to a decrease in interest rates. And that is all confirmed by credit rating agencies like Moody's that are keeping Canada with its stable AAA credit rating. That's worth its weight in gold. We are responsible and are governing for Quebecers and Canadians. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Prime Minister, who's not worth the cost, his habits of wasting money have not changed. And so interest rates are extremely high, as we heard yesterday, confirmed by the Governor of the Bank of Canada. In my riding, Beauce, people are visiting food banks more, 20% more. It just shows that voting for the Bloc Québécois or the Liberals has a high cost. The Bloc Québécois keeps voting to support this inflationary government. When will this Prime Minister stop wasting money and help Quebecers feed and house themselves? The Honourable Government House Leader. Well, not only are there all the investments that I just enumerated, but also Canada has a AAA credit rating, the best in the G7, in fact, the best possible rating. and Moody's mention Canada's predictable, stable economic future, which was supported yesterday by the Governor of the Bank of Canada, who said that he is considering a decrease in interest rates in the near future, and we're very pleased about that.
L'honorable député de Châteauguay-Lacolle.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democracies
Shanahan
throughout the world
is one of the worst.
Are being increasingly threatened by state and non-state actors. For example, we've seen the direct aggression affecting Ukraine, as well as cybersecurity problems. And there's another threat that is ever-growing, right-wing and conspiracy theorist extremism. Can the government House Leader tell us about the importance of standing firm against these threats? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, what with the week we've just had, and dare I say even the last half hour, has been very sad for democracy in Canada. This conservative party, rather, is clearly committed to destroying our fundamental rights. And we saw recently that the leader of the Conservative Party is encouraging white nationalists, anarchists, and misogynists. Things are going in a very dark direction, and I'm concerned.
Mr. Speaker, wildland firefighters have tirelessly kept our communities safe against devastating wildfires. But despite this dangerous and life-saving work, wildland firefighters aren't considered firefighters under the National Occupational Classification. And this impacts their retirement and pensions. It's absurd that the Liberal government and the Conservatives before them have done nothing to fix this. So will the Liberals immediately change this so that wildland firefighters can retire with financial security?
The Honourable Minister of Emergency Preparedness.
Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank all the wildland firefighters who have done amazing work. We have been working very closely with the provincial counterparts to address this issue, but one thing, make it clear, in fact, actually, we care very deeply for the work that they're doing. That's why we've actually increased the tax credit for the volunteer firefighters as well. So we'll do everything possible to make sure that we support them. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the Ontario government is proceeding with construction on the destructive and unnecessary Highway 413, a $10 billion waste of public money to pave through the Greenbelt. This government could have put a stop to it by requiring a thorough environmental assessment in a Restored and Repaired Impact Assessment Act. Instead, they've proposed a change in an omnibus budget bill that could still let projects like Highway 413 off the hook. Will this government strengthen the proposed IAA and reject Highway 413 to prevent paving over 2,400 acres of farmland and green space?
The Honourable Minister of
So we do have some more
Change.
videos coming up
Mr.
right after
Speaker, I
the show,
thank our honourable
guys.
colleague
Got some
for
fun
his
stuff to
question.
watch.
I would remind him that the Supreme Court of Canada, in an opinion last year, told us that we had to revise the Impact Assessment Act. This is exactly what we do. But through an agreement with the Ontario government, we will make sure that federal laws like Species at Risks Act or the Migratory Birds will be able to apply to Project 413, and these elements will be assessed as part of this project. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And that's all the time we have for question period today. I think we have a point of order from the Honourable Member for Durham.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, a point of order. Earlier this week, a lot of noise was made about the Leader of the Opposition saying the term WACKO. And yet earlier, during question period, the government House Leader used decidedly unparliamentary language toward me in an attempt to defend his colleague from Whitby. I'd like to ask that, through you, that the government House Leader apologize and withdraw his comment.
Shameful language.
See, but that's
I
for
did
last.
not hear it because there was lots of noise.
Great. They've got a new secret weapon. All right, guys. Sorry. What are we doing next? We're back into the videos, guys. I would like to say thank you to everybody that joined the show today. It's great. We've got so many cool people in the chat room. It's awesome. We always mean to say hello to everyone. It does get a little chaotic, like late in the show. So if you want to hear your name, you got to get here early. We do appreciate everybody that views. You guys are just the best. Anyhow, we do have some more videos.
Everywhere I go, all across the country, Canadians tell me they want change, real change. And I've been listening. When you look out at the economy these days, it just doesn't feel very fair. With inflation, with high housing costs, with so much uncertainty.
Canadians, yeah, grocery bills suck. Rent sucks. Mortgage renegotiation, oh my God, how are we going to deal with it? Like, these are real fears.
It's time for a real change. Liberals have the plan to make that happen. We hope you can join us.
If I was Prime Minister, I would take responsibility. I would own that. I'm not Prime Minister. Right now, Justin Trudeau is. And if he fails to bring in the sufficient amount for disability benefits for those people, he is failing those people.
Hey gang, what's up? You guys all recognize old Jagmeet Singh from the introduction there? Well, this clown is not helping Canadians, insisting that he is. He's going to support the federal budget based on conditions of Trudeau's words. Doesn't sound good, guys. Vasi Kapalos does a pretty good job of putting the questions right to Singh right here, and you won't like the answers, but thankfully Vasi Kapalos is at least asking the right questions. Let's take a peek.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh there ending speculation and officially announcing that his party will support the federal budget, the first vote on which is expected later today. It's an announcement the leader made on the same day the Canada Dental Care Plan officially launched, as you heard in my interview with Minister Holland a few moments ago, a key pillar of the NDP's supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals. Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the NDP, is here live in studio now to talk more about that. Hi, Mr. Singh. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I appreciate you making the time. Why did you wait 2 weeks to say you support the budget when nothing tangibly changed in the interim?
Well, first off, we wanted to show that we were serious about looking at the budget to make sure what we had fought for was actually there. We want to confirm the things that we secured in the budget, like the school food program, the pharmacare, the dental care, and diabetes medication and device coverage, as well as the Renters Protection Fund. So when we were briefed about it, when we read it, we wanted to make sure that what we had fought for was actually showing up in the budget, and we were confident that that's there. Then we were concerned about certain things, and I raised those concerns, the disability benefit not being enough. And really, that clawbacks were particularly concerning to us. It could put a person living with disabilities in a worse off position, potentially, and that's completely wrong. And I raised that with the Prime Minister directly, and I said, this is wrong, and this can't happen. And there was an openness to addressing those concerns. In addition, I raised concerns about the Jordan's principle not being met, and that's another area where I'm really concerned about. The federal government made a commitment that if an Indigenous child needs care, that the care should be delivered first, jurisdiction worked out afterwards. Well, the federal government's missing that requirement almost 70% of the time, which is a very serious concern. So I raised that with the Prime Minister, and I heard some openness to addressing that. After hearing those concerns being addressed, or an openness to addressing them, I've said now we are prepared to support.
So your support is essentially contingent on an openness from the government? Like, there are lots of things the government has appeared open to which it has not followed through on. Particularly, let's take the example of the disability benefit. It is horrifyingly low, according to advocates, right? $200 a month. When they set expectations that it would bring people out of poverty, how can you support a budget that does that just because the Prime Minister sounds open to addressing a concern?
Well, let's be clear. We agree that with the advocates, if this was an NDP government, we wouldn't allow for this to happen. We would never done this. This is what the Liberals have done. And we are going to continue to attack them, put pressure on them to improve this. They have not shown a willingness to improve the amount, and we think they're wrong. And so we'll continue to mount pressure on them. We'll continue to raise our concerns. We'll continue to fight back. Often with this government, what we've seen is right now, dental care is a great example. It's being rolled out right now. There were many times on this journey where the Liberals said no. They voted against it twice in the past. They said it couldn't happen. They couldn't deliver it. Now seniors are receiving this care. This is testament to New Democrats persevering, fighting for people, and delivering. Similarly, with the disability benefit, we fought for that. Now the Liberals have failed. They haven't delivered what was expected. Like you put it, the advocates have said this is not what we wanted. And on top of that, the advocates said their criteria in terms of eligibility said, please, at a minimum, don't make it based on the disability tax credit. And that's exactly what the Liberals did. So we're concerned about that. We think that's a big problem. And we've addressed that. I've raised that directly with the Prime Minister, and I expect to see solutions.
But you have something available to you that few others do. You have the power to actually sway the vote. The Conservatives and the Bloc were going to vote against. If you added your party's votes to that, the budget would be defeated, the government would go down, and that would be in parallel to how you describe this government. You have said Justin Trudeau is a failed leader who is bad for Canada, and yet you're not willing to actually vote in that manner. You are keeping them in power despite your concerns, despite saying something like that.
Well, the facts are Canadians chose him as Prime Minister. What we're doing is using our power to get the most we can for people. And if we voted against the budget, it would be voting against free birth control for women, free diabetes medication and devices, the child care, the dental care, the Renters Protection Fund, the protection for kids or the support for kids in school to get a nutritious meal. Those are things that we're going to support. We fought for those. We want those to move forward. Pierre Poilievre is against those things. He said right off the top he would be removing the dental care program for seniors, despite having dental care paid for with a publicly funded program for most of his adult life. He would take away the diabetes medication and the devices coverage, which we know is not only going to improve the life of people, save them money, but improve our healthcare system. So that's the difference between us and Conservatives. We want this to move ahead. But we've raised some concerns, and we're going to fight to make sure that those are addressed.
But how do you reconcile telling Canadians on one hand Justin Trudeau is a failed leader? That's your words. A failed leader who is bad for Canada. And on the other hand, essentially just telling them right now, Pierre Poilievre, I think would be worse, so I'm going to just support the budget and not make sure that they get toppled.
Well, it's not. That's not the frame at all. What I'm putting forward is that on their own, the Liberals would have done none of this. They wouldn't have done these things. They are absolutely failed in terms of what they've achieved in the past number of years. We have forced them to do in 2 years significant things for people. The pharmacare, the childcare legislation, the dental care. These are things we forced them to do. If we were not there, they wouldn't have done them. And we've noticed they don't have the urgency to respond to people's needs. When we talk about grocery prices, they allowed grocery prices to exceed general inflation for 2 years before then they started making announcements and still have not yet taken concrete action until we forced them to bring in things like improvements to the Competition Bureau, more strings attached or more teeth attached to legislation to give more power.
Do you think it's you that forced them or public outcry that forced them?
Oh, we absolutely forced them. There's no question about it. Their approach was, on their own, was to call the CEOs and ask them nicely to lower their prices. And then Champagne then said, come out and check out. Minister Champagne said, look at flyers, grocery flyers, prices are coming down. And then said, you know what, I actually don't know if they're coming down. That was the Liberals' approach until we forced them to bring in concrete legislation
but what's changed?
To give more protection.
Even as a result, even if we take that at face value, prices are still terrible at the grocery store.
Yeah, well, so again, the changes have come in just now, so they impact.
But you're keeping a government in power that is presiding over that. Like, you alone are responsible for keeping them in power and calling him a failed leader.
Well, I mean, I think that's not the fair way to look at this. The scenario is we're forcing them to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. Their decisions are their decisions. Their failures are their failures. We're using our power to force them to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. The fact that the Liberals are failing people, that's for the Liberals to answer. If I was Prime Minister, I would take responsibility. I would own that. What? I'm not Prime Minister. Right now, Justin Trudeau is. And if he fails to bring in the sufficient amount for disability benefits for those people, he is failing those people. I'm saying that it should be much higher, and I would make it higher if I was in power.
And look, I understand that those questions on their policies should be directed at them. And believe me, they get those questions for sure.
Of course.
But in the case, for example, of the disability benefit, you had 2 weeks. What does it say that you weren't able to force any of those changes? And ultimately, if you don't, what is the effectiveness of the agreement that you have in place? He's a failed leader, according to you. He's not doing the things that you wanted for the most vulnerable Canadians. Like, what's the point?
It shows that he's out of touch. It's evidence that
the Liberals... Doesn't it show that you are too? No,
it shows the Liberals are out of touch because it is the Liberals that are in power. The Liberals are the ones that are calling the shots. We're using our 25 MPs. Liberals have far more MPs. They're in power. They won the election. We are forcing them to do things they wouldn't otherwise do. We brought in dental care. We brought in pharmacare. We're making people's lives better with the power that we have. The Liberals don't believe that they can actually make people's lives better. They continue to act as if they don't have the power to change things. They want to just cruise by. They have no urgency. We're forcing them to do things. There'll come a time when there's an election. And I'll put to Canadians, look at how out of touch Justin Trudeau was as Prime Minister, how disconnected he was from the struggles you're going through. We fought and forced them to do things that made your life better. but give us the opportunity to be empowered and imagine what we could do together.
I have to ask you the blunt political question. I just have time for one more,
Sure.
which is that people will say, you're not willing to take the step of voting against them or forcing an election because you'd lose. And you'd lose big in the next election. I looked at 3 separate
Lose
polls.
big.
Angus Reid had you
She's
at
putting it
19%,
right to
Abacus
him.
at 17, Nanos
great.
at 16. Your fundraising is 6.8 million compared to 35 million for the Conservatives, 15.6 to the Liberals. Are you just not forcing an election because you don't think you can win?
We're going to have an election, and I'm ready to run as Prime Minister for this country. Until then, I'm going to squeeze as much as I can from this government to make sure people get relief.
But then could be
I want
now.
to see the job. I want to see the job done for the dental care. I want to see it rolled out. I want to see seniors to get
Must
it. I
be
want to see
rolled
them
a
start
little too
accessing the
tightly
program,
today.
and then people can make a choice. Do they want to keep the dental care program or not? Once they see the benefits of it, I want people to make an informed choice. Then Pierre Poilievre will take it away from you. I want to keep it and expand it. People can make a choice on it. I want to see people get diabetes, medication and devices, and free birth control. And then Canadians can choose. Do you want that to continue, or do you want Pierre Poilievre to take it away? Because we know Pierre Poilievre, what he wants to do. He wants to cut pensions. He wants to cut EI. He wants to cut dental care, pharmacare. He wants to cut all those things. I want people to have an informed decision
But they
when they
could
make their
that
choice.
decision now. You could force that
It's not an
decision
informed decision.
now. You don't think any
Not
of
at
that's
all.
informed? You don't
It's
think
not-
you don't think
because
after
people don't
9
have-
years the
people
Canadians don't know what they're in for with
No,
this government?
People don't know the benefit of something that's not in there. Their diabetes medication is not covered right now.
But
Birth
don't you
control
think they
isn't
have a
free right now.
perception of the government right now?
No, I want people to make an informed decision around the benefit of these programs before Pierre Poilievre proposes to cut them. I want people to see, how does this improve your life? And then you can choose. If you want Pierre Poilievre to take that away, you want him to cut pensions, cut EI, and to cut these programs we fought for, people can make that choice once they see the benefit. I want to see people to actually benefit from these things and see how it changes their lives and reduces their costs, improves their health. And then people can choose what they want. They want to keep it or not.
So I read there is no chance of you being responsible for an election happening before the date that's set out.
Ultimately, we see that the Prime Minister and the Liberal government will call the election when they want. We're going to fight as hard as we can to get people as much help as possible. And Pierre Poilievre wants to cut it all.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Mr. Singh, thank you so much for coming into studio. I appreciate it.
All right, gang, so what? Hey, gang, what's up? Just Aaron. So. We've got one more video that we're going to end the show with. This is more Jagmeet Singh because we were all kind of frustrated watching him bullshit us right there. But this is going to get you even more riled. He is the most expensive MP in Parliament. He expenses the most back at Canadians. Let's take a peek. And also, we're going to let this one roll. We're going to end on this. Take a peek at it, though. It's crazy how much money this guy spends. Guess who spends the least? Pierre Poilievre. Anyways, right here, Question Period Canada. How you doing today? So, Jagmeet Singh, how do you feel about this clown? So, some people say he's just in it for the pension. I don't know about that. Maybe he's just in it for the Rolexes, the BMWs. I've got another idea. He's in it for the government expenses. Did you know that Jagmeet Singh spent $533,000 of your hard-earned tax dollars expensed in the first 3 quarters of last fiscal year? It's ridiculous. Well. Here he is doing scrums saying that the NDP is contributing, that he's not in bed with Trudeau, that there is no dependable coalition. I don't know about that. Talks about the NDP plan, but I don't really ever hear a plan. Let's take a look at Jagmeet Singh. Is this guy trash or toilet? Where are we going to put Jagmeet?
Hello. Hi. How are you?
Hey, good. I'm good to just rock, just go and jump in. I feel like I gave a speech, so I don't need to do an opening. So feel free to just jump in.
Casual.
Yeah. Do you want to get rid of the consumer carbon price?
Well, what we want to do is we want to lay out our vision, a new Democrat vision for how we tackle the climate crisis. And the thing that we are noticing is that we need big polluters to pay their fair share. We want to stop big polluters, and we want to make sure that there's a cost to that pollution so that we've got to stop them. We need government to take real action. It can't just be that our only approach to fighting the climate crisis is using free market solutions. That is not sufficient to meet the seriousness of what we're up against. And we also don't want this to turn into a question for everyday people that, am I worried about affordability or am I worried about the climate crisis? I don't want that to be the choice that workers and people are having to struggle with.
Because people aren't struggling right now. It's like, not a problem, Jagmeet. Don't worry. We only have these 2 issues.
I don't want the burden to fall on working people. So we want to lay out our plan, which addresses the real solutions and using government power to tackle big polluters, and that unites working people together.
So for the consumer price specifically, though, do you want to get rid of it? Do you want to pause it? Do you want to stop the hikes? Like, what are you proposing here?
I would say that not many things quite like the coalition are uniting people. People are getting together, that's for sure.
For our full plan, we're going to release that plan and we're going to present that to Canadians. So we don't have our full plan laid out, but we have some elements, the principles of our plan. And the principles I want to lay out today were that I find it problematic that the Liberals have set up a divisive system where they're dividing the country. Some people got an advantage very cynically. It was pretty obvious that it was for votes in the Atlantic region, and that's the wrong approach to fighting the climate crisis. It shouldn't be that certain regions get different treatment than other regions. I think that's wrong. I also think that Pierre Poilievre has spent a lot of time making very clear that Pierre Poilievre's approach to have no climate plan, and really his plan is to let big polluters dump toxic waste into our rivers without any regulation. That's what's going to happen. Pollute our air, pollute the land. I think that is absolutely wrong. So I want to...
Okay, I'm just going to interject and say that I think Pierre Poilievre's main focus for helping the environment would be nuclear energy, but Jagmeet wants to trash him instead.
Carve out a different path, a new Democrat path, one that acknowledges working people and acknowledges the need for fighting the climate crisis, and that it is going to be working people that bear the brunt of it. So we're starting to chart that course.
You spoke in your speech about unity. You need unity to fight climate change. How much of that, and how much of your support for yesterday's Conservative motion is about building unity underneath the NDP banner across the country? So provincial NDPs as well as federal NDP party on this issue.
Well, our focus is really on building, I mean, of course I want the party to be united, but really our focus is on building unity with working people. And our concern is that the current approach has been divisive and has been dividing people, and that it sets up this question, which I'm really worried about, that it pits affordability against fighting the climate crisis. And that to me is a problem. It should not be that a working class person has to make that choice, that am I on climate fighting side or am I on affordability side? That is not going to result in a solidarity that we need, a consensus that we need to take on what is a very serious problem. I remember going to communities just last summer, going to the capital of a territory where there were people evacuated from their community only to have the entire capital further evacuated. Like, this is serious. People have lost their homes already. We're seeing extreme weather. In one community, I saw a forest fire like they've never seen before, and then...
You know how the forest fires are starting, right? People are starting the forest fires. Most of them.
Flooding like they've never seen before in the very same community. This is serious, and I want to be able to fight this in a way that brings people together.
But you say unity for working people. That's something that, Pierre Poilievre has been kind of edging into your territory in terms of resonating with working people, especially in the West, especially oil and gas workers, people whose livelihoods depend on those industries. So how are you going to bridge that gap? I mean, it's a perennial question for you, but at this point, is this yesterday's move part of doing that?
I would say, and I meant this when I said this on stage, Pierre Poilievre is lying to workers. He is lying to them.
Well,
he is not in.
Oh my goodness, what a thing for Jagmeet to say. This is going to come up again. I'm sure Poilievre's not going to let that go.
Interested in fighting for working people. We know, and there's so much evidence, that when the cost of living was what workers are worried about, I understand that, I've lived that, I know what it's like to be worried about putting food on the table. What workers are worried about is the cost of living. We know conclusively that the major driver of the cost of living going up when it comes to groceries is corporate greed. He has never touched on that. He has never gone after that. And it is not a coincidence that one of his chief strategists is literally a lobbyist for the largest corporate grocery store in the country. He is never going to actually make workers' lives better, because he's not going to go after the real reason why your prices are so high. We are, and we are committed to that. So I would tell workers, he is lying to you. Not just because of what he did when he was in Harper's government, but look at what he has proposed. He's proposed to attack EI, to take that away, take pensions away, to take health care away. All these things that workers need, he wants to take it away.
This, in my opinion, is fear-mongering, but what would you expect, I guess?
If you're a worker and you buy into what Poilievre is saying, because he's speaking to things you've been feeling for a number of years, and then you come along and say he's lying to you, are you not saying that, you're stupid for believing him?
No, not at all. I'm saying that Pierre Poilievre is lying. the people are only going to rely on what they're hearing. But I'm telling them,
this reporter's pretty good. She keeps fighting the good fight, it would seem.
that Pierre Poilievre is lying. Let's look at what he's actually doing, and let's look at the evidence behind what's going on. He is lying when he says he cares about working people, because he wants to take away healthcare, he wants to take away EI, he wants to take away pension. And these are things that he has already said very openly. These are things that are direct attacks on working people. That doesn't hurt a billionaire. That doesn't hurt a CEO, but that hurts a working class person. And so when he says he's on your side, he's lying to you. And I don't blame people for having received a message on their cell phone that says he's on their side. But my job is to let them know he is lying to you, and this is what he's really about.
Do you just clarify one thing? I know you said you're going to roll out your full climate plan soon, but that you did touch upon, having polluters pay having corporations pay for the pollution that they produce. Are you saying that a carbon price is a central component, and going forward, this is something that your party is sticking forward to? What form it takes, whether it's a consumer tax or if it's something that is simply focusing on big industrial polluters, but a price on carbon is a central component of an NDP climate plan. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I can tell you that we had there was a recent report that assessed the strength of different policies and how they are actually impacting climate goals and reducing emissions. And we found that the evidence shows that an industrial price on pollution is absolutely working, and we believe that is a very strong component of how we take on the climate crisis. And we want more attention on the policies that are the biggest drivers of lowering emissions. An industrial price on pollution is absolutely fundamentally a big part of it. Other regulations like methane regulations, other measures are very effective. Let's work on what's most effective bringing down emissions and double down on that. Make those even stricter, make those even stronger. Look at other ways for us to really take on big polluters who are the real cause of the climate crisis we're in. That's where we want to put our emphasis. And we don't want working people to feel like they're shouldering the burden. That's not fair, and frankly, not a New Democrat solution to the problem.
Do you think your deal with the Liberals is still helping you politically in terms of Canadian support?
I can't wait to hear this answer, because it is not. The polls dramatically show that it is hurting the NDP badly.
Well, I mean, I answered this question a bit on stage, and I really believe this. And I know it's hard to understand because people, particularly liberal and conservatives, only operate through a lens of power. But when I share the story about Brianna, I've got so many stories like that, where real people in our country who could not afford getting dental care have been receiving it because of New Democrats. Knowing that seniors who I've met who live with pain in their teeth can get their teeth fixed soon is the victory for us. Making sure we can help with the cost of diabetes medication, birth control, that's what New Democrats, why I became a politician, to make a...
Those are all things that provinces take care of. That's not a federal jurisdiction. He's full of it, guys.
To make life better for people. And I know it also convinces people that we can get things done. And I think it's proof that when we say we can do something, we can get it done, we can actually achieve it. It gives people confidence. When I say I'm going to take on corporate greed, I'm going to build homes that you can afford, people can know that I'm coming from a place where we've done big things to make people's lives better. We can do a lot more as well.
Are you worried though that you're...
Oh, you didn't get one. I do one more after.
Okay, we'll do two more.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Everybody gets a question.
Oh, he's everybody's buddy. He's working with everybody. I want to point out just for a moment that during the same period of time that Jagmeet Singh spent 533,000 Dax dollars on expenses, Pierre Poilievre, during the same amount of time, $60,000. How does that add up? Doesn't make much sense.
Are you worried though that the Liberals' situation in the polls right now is starting to affect you and your party?
What we've noticed is that the Liberals' weak position in the polls gives us more leverage to squeeze more out of them. And my goal is, as long as I have an opportunity to squeeze as much help for people as possible to make Ottawa work for them, I'm going to do that. And then when the time comes for an election, I'm running to become Prime Minister.
Why do you think you get more leverage that way?
I feel like they're nervous about what's going to happen, and so we're using that nervousness or anxiety of the Liberals to force them to work for people. I'll give you the last question.
Thank you, Jiggy. 8 to 14% isn't nothing in terms of reductions of emissions for consumer carbon pricing. What would the party tell your grassroots, climate-conscious foundation that think that turning back on a consumer carbon pricing is a mistake, political theater, cynical even?
Well, I would just say that the major concern I have is that the policies that are working the best, we know very clearly industrial price on pollution and other regulations of that nature are working very well. Let's double down on what works for sure, because we know it works. And I don't want a scenario where working people are put in that really uncomfortable and unfair position where they have to choose between their livelihood, like do I make my bills, do I put food on the table, or do I care about fighting the climate crisis? I don't want that to be the question in the minds of people. I want consensus and solidarity where we all get this is a fight that we need to win together. And so I don't want the burden to fall on working class people. And then frankly, New Democrats, that's not something that sits well with us. We believe in making the big polluters pay and not having working people feel like they're the ones that are somehow having to shoulder this. And that's why we're laying out a path for a New Democrat vision for how we fight the climate crisis and make life affordable and create good jobs.
Because all of these things can happen at once. It doesn't make any practical sense to me. Doesn't add up. So after spending 12 or 13 minutes with old Jagmeet, what do you think? Trash, toilet, what is this guy lying to us? He called Poilievre a liar 4, maybe 5 times in that piece. Ridiculous. He spent $533,000 of government expense money, your tax dollars, thrown out the window. A guy like Pierre Poilievre, he spent $60,000 in the same amount of time. You would think that it would cost more for Poilievre than it, like especially by those margins. I don't know, pension, Rolexes, BMWs. It's just frustrating because he feels to me like he's dividing and distracting. I've had people that watch some of my videos ask, do you think he's going to break up with Trudeau? And I'm like, no, I do not think he is. I think that's a ruse to get Canadians to think that it's going to happen, because that's just running out the clock till the next election. Who knows? Anyhow, I'm Aaron. This is Question Period Canada. We have a black All right, gang, so one more video. This is a battle from committee that's pretty interesting. I think it's 5 or 6 minutes long, and that's what we're going to wrap up on today. Again, I want to thank everybody that joined the chat. Good to see Rickety. Good to see Kenny Crow back in the house. Don Boulay. There's a whole bunch of people. Thank you for all the support, Mike Tremblay. That's awesome. Amazing. And also, Kenny, thank you for all your help. I should mention to other people that might not know, Kenny's been a big help to me. It would be complicated to explain how, but he has been. I also wanted, there's a few people. Donald Logan, Muskrat, Menacing Muskrat has been helpful. Mr. Pickles is always helpful. Anyways, you guys are the best, but let's get into the next video. Oh, grab the right mouse. We do have one more video here that we're going to end out on.
Please.
Let's go with it.
Top arrived scam contractor, GC Strategies owner Christian Firth had his home raided by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police 2 days ago as part of the Mounties investigation to his work with the Trudeau government. Christian Firth is well documented as part of the more than dozen investigations into his role with government contracting for fraud, forgery. He has a track record of meeting some of the most senior public servants at bars and steakhouses. Minister, do you think that's normal?
I was not here at that time as president of the Treasury Board. However, I would expect that rules would be followed at every instance. Because I was not here, I am not certain if the rules were followed, and I will ask my colleague to respond.
So, the Minister, it's a question of judgment. The question is, do you think Canadians find it acceptable that millionaire consultants are discussing government contracts with senior officials, many who control these contracts, and are chatting over whiskey and steak about getting paid with taxpayer money? Do you think Canadians find that acceptable?
I do not know exactly what occurred, but I don't find it acceptable to violate any rule or principle. There's an importance of letting the RCMP do their work. I am not, as a Minister of the Crown, going to interfere in the investigation of an independent organization, and I think it is important that we let that investigation continue. And then, as the Minister of Public Safety has said, we look forward to following the recommendations of the RCMP. Thank you.
Minister, do you know what the TBS employees discussed at these outings, at steakhouses and bars with the millionaire consultants? Mr. Paul Gerard, Savak Ashkabashian, Gary Hoban, like these are directors, the former chief information officer, senior advisors. Do you know what they discussed?
So if you don't mind, I'll take the question, Minister. As I
Ms.
mentioned,
Cahill, the question is does the minister know? So unless your answer is if the minister knows or not, I'd like to hear from the minister, please.
I do not know. I was not the president of the Treasury Board at the time.
Oh, Minister, I'm glad that you find it funny, but this is a $60 million scandal. We have the RCMP kicking doors in because there is fraud and corruption and people who work in your department. And so just because they shuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic every couple of months, you're still responsible for the department. And so if your suggestion is that we need the former president of the Treasury Board to come and tell us what's going on in your department, then I'd appreciate that as a suggestion. But it is incumbent on you, when there's a matter of great public interest like this, to at least show an interest and concern for what's going on. My question to you, on what date was Min Doan hired as the Chief Information Officer?
It is not my purview, Mr. Chair, in response to that allegation that I find this funny or that I in some way do not care about this issue. It is not my purview to oversee the day-to-day work of employees.
No one's in charge, Minister,
and
over there. No one's in charge.
as the president of the Treasury Board, will continue to ensure that we promulgate guidelines and policies for public servants to follow. It is the responsibility of deputy heads, including the deputy head of the CBSA, to ensure that rules are followed. In terms of the individual that the honourable colleague just mentioned, I will ask the CIO to respond.
Just the date, please, sir.
I believe it was May 2023. I can't give you the specific date, but I can get that to you in writing, no problem.
Was it a competitive process?
As far as I understand, he came over at level.
So it wasn't a competitive process. Who was in charge of that decision, that hiring?
It would have been my predecessor, Catherine Llewellyn.
Catherine Llewellyn. And who was in the position before him?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Paul Gerard? Nope.
No, Mr. Girard, if I may, Mr. Chair, was reporting directly to me, and Mr. Girard was the CIO for the Treasury Board Secretariat as a department.
So who was in the role before Min Doan was hired, is the question.
Sam, do you know?
It was Mark Brouillard.
Mark Brouillard.
Mark Brouillard. It's interesting that we have successive chief information officers who favor GC strategies, one who provides testimonials for the website and one who is willing to lie before committee to hide his favoritism for GC strategies. The question is, who else at the Treasury Board Secretariat are GC strategies fanboys?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That is going to wrap it up, guys. So we're going to wind it down. And this is how the show ends. So you guys all have a good weekend. We are going to be signing out for now. Check out our other videos, like, subscribe, comment, get notified, all those fun things. And we'll be back on Monday with more Question Period Canada. Tell somebody, get somebody to come and watch it with you. If not, we'll be here. Looking forward to seeing you. Thanks, Sheila. Thanks, Kirk. Thanks, everybody. What a great day. Have a good weekend, guys. We are out.